Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Transforming Freedom for DeepSec 2007. We have here Jeff Moss from the United States of America. And Jeff Moss, would you be so nice just to introduce yourself, in which area you work, and just tell why you came here to Vienna as a security advisor and programmer.
So my name's Jeff Moss, and I'm primarily known for starting the world's largest hacker convention called DEF CON. And then later on, I started a conference, information security, called Black Hat. And so I've been doing that for about 15 years. And so now I've sort of grown up with the computer security industry in the United States and watched a lot of interesting things happen along the way.
And can you just tell us your age? When you have 15 years in the business, when did you start?
Yeah, so I'm 37 now. Right.
So it means that with 22, you started to sort of be professional in terms of organizing security, intelligent people?
But back then, you've got to remember, there was no industry really around the internet. The internet was so brand new. So really it was all about organizing hackers, trying to spread information, get people talking from different perspectives. So the very first conference I did organize was, we had prosecutors, we had hackers, we had a hacker that was being prosecuted by the prosecutor at the show. We had all kinds of people there, and the whole idea was to share information. And then since then, all of a sudden you could get jobs in information security. People my age all of a sudden could become employed. The internet was growing, and all of a sudden there's all this opportunity. But in the beginning it was purely seeking knowledge. Now you can seek a career.
And is it still today interesting to seek the knowledge by meeting people face to face, listening to talks, joining the discussion?
Yeah. There's a difference between talking electronically online and seeing somebody's expression and getting feedback from their body posture and just getting an idea of what's going on, overhearing conversations, things you can't do electronically. It's very important.
And it stays important, or do you think that will somehow by video conferencing die out?
No, I don't. I keep thinking about that, but I don't think it's going to happen. You can transfer knowledge, I think, electronically, but you can't transfer a sense of community. I don't think very well. I mean, look at MySpace. You can have 10,000 friends on your MySpace page, but are they really your friends? You know. And
in less worrying or in a less disturbing issue area of IT culture, which would be for me telelearning. There I think as well the contact to the teacher and the conversation of two generations, which normally is sort of wiped out of the picture, that would be the same phenomena. So you don't think that e-learning, telelearning will really make it in the future?
No, I think you can learn specific tidbits of information, but I don't think it's the same as building a community or a culture. I think that happens in person. So how do you get a sense of someone, I think happens in person.
Right. Now this digital culture has its own pace in a way. Yeah. It has its own pace of creating money bubbles and letting them burst. It has its own pace in creating legal problems and letting them be resolved or unresolved. Yeah. It has its own pace of creating new knowledge in young people that get the knowledge by these tidbits that you're talking about, but then become a part of the constructive community and even build their own software or do an exploit. So if you say that you're now 37, you were 22 when you started organizing these face-to-face events and FaceTime between people that have this serendipity, as they say, these little surprises of changing the picture of the other hacker. And I would be interested now to say, when the hackers started, it was not, if we have 2007 now, you're talking about 95, doing your first DEF CON. Then we're talking about 84. There was a hacker magazine called 2600. Yeah. What changed from the 80s to the 90s, mostly?
I mean, I started when I was about 13 years old with bulletin boards and dial-up modems, and you could really see the culture evolve as it became more accessible, as more people got involved. It went from very die-hard specialists, and you used to be able to get 3 or 4 people in a room, and those 3 or 4 people knew pretty much the sum total of everything you could learn about telephones, about networking, about Unix systems. Nowadays, you could get 400 people in a room, and you still wouldn't be able to because the sum total of knowledge has grown. Specialization has occurred at such a fast and rapid rate. There's people who can be web exploit experts in two completely different realms. So what we've seen is this massive explosion of information, and it's too much for one person to sort of contain anymore. It's too specialized.
And what I always hear from hackers is that the corporate form of organization, which is anti-hacker, hackers are individualists, I would say, more or less. They might get in a corporate, but this then even is differently organized or has a different feel to it. But the other corporates would be big companies, international players, and the old 19th century national state, which is an international player by itself. But I hear hackers saying that they say they always have to try to make the impression that they understand, that they have the knowledge to do security or to be in the front of not being exploited, but being able to secure the customers, to build secure systems. And you have even here, for instance, in Sweden, there started a sort of not hacker movement, but file sharing movement, P2P, called the Pirates. So they had a pirate bureau, they had a pirate bay, or they have it now, it's all running, and they have a pirate party even, which 35,000 people got to vote for because they made their own propaganda for voting just by PDFs to download and stick to your local newspaper or whatever. So, and they would say, I don't even believe in this Big Brother crap. This is a quotation now by a young guy from Stockholm. I don't even believe in this Big Brother crap. The people that use the internet and make it what they want it to be will always have the nose in front of the governments or the corporate law firm, the corporate firms. Do you believe that? Is that in your judgment, is that true, or might that change?
Oh, that will definitely change, I believe, because just like you used to be able to understand or comprehend everything that's occurring on the internet in the old days, nowadays it's just too complicated. If you were trying, for example, that person, if he was trying to be sneaky, there's just too many ways now that you could possibly be caught. It's not as simple as it used to be. And so I think to be a very clever, very sophisticated, say, attacker or hacker, requires so much skill and dedication now. You see some of the most successful ones are criminal organizations. And they're, well-oiled machines, groups of people with money. And they can maybe stay ahead, but that's because they have resources and they don't mind breaking the law. As a standalone hacker that's someone who doesn't care about Big Brother, it's really, really hard to get around Big Brother. I mean, that's a full-time job with a lot of effort to not show up on Big Brother's radar. And people don't generally spend that kind of energy. They get registered out on Big Brother and they don't care. And that's, I think, the difference between my generation of hackers, which was very kind of paranoid and very careful to not be detected, and the current generation, where they're posting their information on MySpace and spreading their info on LinkedIn, and to them it doesn't seem strange. That's what you do with your information. You seem to share it. And in my generation, you sort of had one identity, your hacker handle. Now you talk to younger hackers and they've got an identity for LinkedIn, they've got an identity for Flickr, they've got an identity for a dating site, they have an identity for Facebook. I mean, to them, the concept of identity is so much different than in my generation. I maybe could manage 2 identities. These people are now managing like 6, 7, or 8 identities, and they're switching between them rapidly. They're different people to different friends on the phone, on text, on instant messenger. So I think that concept of identity is definitely shifted for this generation, and it's shifted because of the internet.
But these people with 7 identity can get caught more easily.
I think so, because they're human, and they'll say something on one forum that cross-pollinates into another forum. They'll have a cookie left in their browser from one session that's now read on another session. They're using their single computer to do 6 different things, and the information will pollute between the different sessions.
Now I would like to approach a very interesting story or an event or something that really took a lot of people of your community off guard in a way, and I think this is the Cisco and Black Hat conflict or whatever. But before we start to tell that, can you tell me what in the hacker world is an exploit?
That's a broad question. So I guess an exploit would be any means of achieving an unintended result. So, for example, an exploit could be considered a way of impersonating someone to log in. So you're not that person, you've impersonated them, you've logged in. That could be through a technological means, that could be through taking their badge, that could be through stealing their keys, exploiting their keys by getting them from them. So generally what hackers do is they find, in the current generation, there's a lot of web vulnerabilities. They manage to trick your browser into doing things it wasn't intended to do. You browse to one site, you get exploited, and now everything you do since that point is maybe being tracked. Your keystrokes are being logged, or they're watching what websites you go to gather information or perform some kind of identity theft or something. So an exploit could be anything from vulnerability in your operating system, in your browser, in your mobile phone, the way you don't throw away your credit card, you don't shred your credit card information. There's many ways you could be exploited. And as the technology has grown up, the number of vectors that you can be attacked through have multiplied. And you hear security researchers talk about an attack surface. And the attack surface is sort of this theoretical sphere, and on this sphere is every possible way you could possibly be attacked. And the whole concept of preventative measures or risk management is how do you reduce your attack surface? How do you make it as difficult as possible for an exploit to be successful?
And when did you do your first exploit?
When I was probably 14. Back then it was all about you have to remember, when I was that young, the internet wasn't free, it wasn't even really available. Computers were really expensive. Telephone calls and long distance were really expensive. So you had all these barriers to getting to knowledge. There was no Amazon online, there was no books on computer security. So if you wanted to figure this out, you had to find someone. And generally that person was long distance. So you had to make a lot of long distance calls, which was expensive. So you tried to figure out how to make phone calls for free.
And that was the 2600 frequency for some time?
Yeah, for some time. That was one of the tricks, yeah.
Can you just explain that? That was an exploit of its own kind, no?
Well, no, it was, so the 2600 hertz tone was used in blue boxing. And there were some other tones too, the KP and SP tone. And basically what you were doing is you were tricking the phone switching equipment into thinking that you were issuing additional routing commands. So when you touch your tones on your keyboard, on your telephone, there's 1 through 0, and pound and star. Well, there's 3 additional tones too that aren't on your keypad, and you could manipulate those tones to issue additional commands. And in the old days, they didn't filter those tones out. So as a home user, you could inject those tones into the microphone, and the phone switch would still hear that information. Nowadays, it's all filtered, you can't do it. But back then, they didn't filter any of it.
So when you started, the internet was just coming up, right? And was becoming big. Just a short question, do you come from a background like your father was an electrical engineer or something? How would you be interested in the first place?
Completely random. My dad's a doctor, and there was some deal at the university where you could get a computer at a discount. And they thought that maybe these computers things would be big one day and they should maybe get one for the kids. And so my sister was not interested in it at all. So next thing you know, it ends up in my room, and I'm on it all day long and all day long. And then they thought maybe it was a bad idea because I'd be up to 3 a.m. every night. And then in the end, it was a good thing. So, but you never knew. I mean, back then it was, everybody on the block had a different kind of computer. I just happened to have the IBM PC, which turned out to be the one that was dominant. But your next door neighbor would have a color computer, or an Atari 400 and 800, or a TI, or a Coco, or Amiga and Apple. Everybody had something, and I just got lucky and ended up with that one.
All right. Now, as we know what an exploit is, you hackers that you are here, if I try to understand, if I come to DeepSec 2007 in Vienna, there are about 20, 30, 40 people that know each other from the net, that know each other from exploits that were successful, but sometimes even they would be now a security advisor for a firm where the next speaker hacked me last month. Is that possible?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. But now you've got to remember the industry has grown up, and a lot of us when we started, there were no laws against any of this, and really nothing was too much at risk. 15 years ago, nothing was really online of any importance. Some porn sites, and that was about it. Nowadays, everything is online, and things are much more critical. So things have become maybe more serious. And as people have grown up,